I would say now I've been, for the most part, single for a few years. So now sometimes I feel like, okay, another new place, make new friends again, and wishing to like find somebody to be in a couple to do it together, but also with equal strength, wishing just to stay somewhere for a much longer time to build a community instead of going somewhere new all of the time.
Hello and welcome to One Words, the podcast about solo traveling. My name is Anja and I am your tour guide. Whilst traveling in Thailand, I met a bunch of new people with the most interesting travel stories, which I thought needed to be told to a wider community. So here it is, another episode in English. My guest Cait has been traveling the world for more than 11 years now. As an English teacher and blogger, she chose professions that are compatible with her curiosity for visiting new places and meeting different people. In her pursuit of novelty, she also is looking for a place where she can build a base. But so far, she doesn't seem to be finished with looking at new things or hasn't found the perfect spot yet. We talked about her experiences in varying eco-communities, why we both love-hate India, and about being able to have friends of friends in the whole world. To set the scene, we talked in a place surrounded by a beautiful garden at night, so the noise in the back you hear, that's the orchestra of cicadas in the background. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad that we have this talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
So, what does traveling mean to you?
Oh my goodness. What does traveling mean to me? Traveling to me is an opportunity to continually reinvent myself and to discover different parts of the world, at the same time different parts of human experience, at the same time different parts of myself.
That's such a good answer.
Really?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's but reinventing yourself. So, have you traveled to South America?
Actually, no, I've never been to South America. I would love to. I've been to Central America, but not South. Do you want to go? Next year?
Yeah, let's go.
Next year.
But, so Central America. Would you say you're a different person in Central America than you are in Southeast Asia?
Interesting. Yeah, okay, so I'm a different person now than I was last time I was in Central America, for sure. When I was there, so most of the last 11 years of travels, I've been mostly very much in the so-called like hippie community. Mm-hmm. And so in Nicaragua, I was living in the jungle in between two different like eco-community hostel type places, very, very much like so-called hippie atmosphere. But when the pandemic started, I thought that it would be a good idea to leave there. It was a really bad place to be in terms of people taking it seriously and the government taking it seriously and borders closing and flights getting canceled and people getting stuck there. So I had to go, and the pandemic took me to a bunch of places that I never would have gone to normally, that were not at all in my normal hippie demographic, and at the same time seeing how the people that I would normally surround myself by reacted very differently to me to the pandemic. I became, I think, kind of distant from that community. And so now I think I'm very different than I was then. And so in Southeast Asia, different than in Central America. Mm-hmm.
So where did it take you where you wouldn't have gone without the pandemic?
So first, it took me to South Korea. I just started Googling what countries have responded well to the pandemic so far. This is like mid to late March 2020. And then also Googling in parallel what countries are still accepting U.S. passport holders and checking how long we can go without a visa. And Korea had managed well, and they allowed U.S. passport holders to enter for 90 days with no visa. And at that time, they still had no quarantine. Although I did quarantine, but wasn't like mandated. Mm-hmm. And it was a place I would never go because Korea, in my imagination, is a place that's very conventional, which is true in a way. It reminded me actually a lot of Germany, but in Asia. Like everything is very functional, everything works, people are on time, services are running the way that they're meant to. And I was really surprised to discover there, even though I was very much outside of my normal world, I could still make friends and have really nice, lovely bonds and connections with people. And I'd imagined that I wouldn't make any friends in Korea. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go there and sit out the pandemic for a few months. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I ended up just for 3 months in Pennsylvania Amish country, in a town called Intercourse, where there were hooves of horses clopping by my house every few minutes that I could hear out the window. There I definitely wouldn't have gone, but I had to go back to the U.S. to sort out some paperwork for my Israeli immigration that I was trying to do. And I just got a place there with a friend who also needed a place for 3 months. That was definitely new. And then when I got my Israeli paperwork in order, they went into their second lockdown in Israel, and they had managed it really well before, but then it didn't seem like a great time to go in the middle of a lockdown, and I wasn't going to stay in Pennsylvania Amish country, so I did the same Googling thing again and ended up in Grenada in the Caribbean because they didn't have COVID, life was normal, and they were accepting U.S. passport holders. It was very easy to go there, and they were just starting to reopen. So I stayed there for 8 months. And it's another place that would never have been on my radar. I'd never heard of it. Grenada, I thought it's like Granada in Spain. So also there, I managed to make some really great connections and hang out with people that I would normally really, really never hang out with otherwise. And yeah, I'm really glad I did it.
It sounds really interesting. But maybe we take a step back. Mm-hmm. So, as we heard, you are a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
But you traveled a lot, and traveling is part of your life now. But how came that to be? So when did it all start?
It started 11 and a half years ago. I knew that I wanted to take a semester and go overseas at some point during college, and it had been like a fantasy ever since I was a little kid. And I fantasized I would go either to New Zealand or Denmark. And then one summer, before the start of the sophomore year of college, I had one of those terrible fundraising jobs where you have to knock on people's door and ask for money for charity. And this girl that I just happened to be paired with one day of that job in the whole summer told me about her trip to India, where she'd lived in this reforestation eco-community in the south of India, full of backpackers from all over the world living together and practicing sustainable living and learning about reforestation and water conservation and permaculture and all kinds of things. And it sounded absolutely magical. And I've always loved the idea of communities, like intentional communities. And this was one. So I just decided, like, at that moment, like, never mind New Zealand, never mind Denmark. And I saved all my money for a year, bought a plane ticket about 7 months in advance, and took a semester off to go to this place in India. And the place is, like, really stimulating. Like, you meet people from so many different countries who have, like, very eclectic people from around the world. And a lot of those people weren't living, like, conventional lifestyles with a normal job and 2 weeks vacation a year, which is what we get in the U.S. And these people were, like, people who were traveling long-term, and no one ever told me you could do that. And I always really dreaded graduating and having to get a 9-to-5 job, and, like, I was just really not looking forward to it. So when I found out there's people that are traveling for years and years, I was just like, okay, well, maybe I can make this happen. And I met this one guy named Jeff Brown who told me he's been traveling for 10 years and he was an English teacher. And that stuck in my head. So I became an English teacher. And now I can say I've been traveling for as long as he was back then.
So you've been traveling since then, or did you go back to the US after the half a year you said you've been to India?
That was only 3.5 months, the first trip. I went back for a semester of school, and I didn't feel like I fit in anymore like I had before I left, but I didn't feel the same way anymore, and I wasn't really happy to be back there. And so I was like, I have to find another way to go again. And I really wanted to study Buddhism, so I found a university in Nepal inside of a Buddhist monastery that was like a uni for Westerners and locals to study and get some teachings from the actual Tibetan monks and some from like Western anthropologists who would give another view. And I did a study abroad and then went back just to finish my last 2 semesters of school and then left. And now I've just been back to visit.
So the podcast is about solo traveling. So you did a lot of solo traveling, or were you a group?
So far I've found with solo travel that I'm never alone for a long time. Like the place in India, there were a lot of solo travelers there. So within a couple months, I had a group of friends to leave with and travel around India with. And other times, like I went to Nepal by myself, but I ended up getting a boyfriend there. And then we traveled together in a lot of different countries. And then I went to Australia by myself, exact same story, etc. So sometimes it's by myself, sometimes it's meet people traveling and then go together.
Is there a kind you prefer, being alone or going as a couple, for instance?
I think both really have benefits. I feel like it's been really good for me to have a kind of balance of both. But when I've had one for a long time, then I crave the other.
Oh, okay.
But if you're in a couple or in a group, you don't meet people as easily. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't feel as exciting or as adventurous, at least in terms of the social aspect.
Yeah.
But you have your person, so you're not really as lonely as like you might be when you're a solo traveler and you get to a new place and it takes you a while to make friends. So yeah, both good.
Do you remember a situation where you would say, okay, this is where it brings me to my breaking point, like a confrontation or something where I say, okay, there I would rather be with company or in a couple or something. There I don't want to be a solo traveler anymore.
Interesting. Not like a dramatic breaking point. I would say now I've been, for the most part, single for a few years. So now sometimes I feel like, okay, another new place, make new friends again, and wishing to like find somebody to be in a couple to do it together, but also with equal strength, wishing just to stay somewhere for a much longer time to build a community instead of going somewhere new all of the time. I feel like I can go most places in the world and say like, hey, do I have a friend here or a friend of a friend here? And I'll know somebody. Mm-hmm. Like a classmate of mine from Nepal was in Thailand recently, and he's probably coming back. He went back to Nepal, but we're going to meet up, hopefully. All kinds of stuff like that has happened. Like recently, I needed to get my third vaccination, and I had to travel across Israel to get it. And I needed to teach English that day in the afternoon, and I didn't want to cancel on my students. So I just wrote on Facebook, do I know somebody in Beersheba who has a friend there who will let me just use their house for English classes for the afternoon, and explain the situation. And this guy that I met in India 10 years ago, not even Israeli, is like, oh yeah, I have some friends in Beersheba. And he knew them from the same place in India, the eco place that I knew him from. Mm-hmm. So I went to see them, and I taught English in their house, and we had dinner together, and they were really, really cool. We had a great time together.
That's so nice. That's really great. So you have the feeling that you have friends all over the world, or friends of friends.
Friends and friends of friends, yeah, exactly.
That's so nice.
So a few summers ago, I was doing this trip couch surfing around Israel, mm-hmm. and I decided, okay, I want to go to Palestine too. And I was really interested to like meet people from like what I perceived to be a different world than me. So I wrote a public trip request on couch surfing. You know couch surfing? Mm-hmm. So I wrote, I'm coming to Bethlehem. I would like to meet people who are different than me. If you can host me, please let me know. And a lot of people offered me to host. But there was one girl whose message stood out, and she wasn't in Bethlehem. She was in Ramallah, but she saw my public trip request, and she said, I'm actually more interested in finding out how all people are the same, but you can stay with me if you want to. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really deep. I like what she said. So I changed my trip and canceled Bethlehem and went to Ramallah. And in her house, within the first 5 minutes, we just sat down and started making small talk. And within 5 minutes, we discovered that she and I both went to the same tiny little college on a mountain in Vermont in the USA. This college has 200 students.
Okay.
She went to the graduate school part of it, which is just like a tiny, tiny, tiny community. And she's a local Palestinian girl, so that's like not normal that mm-hmm. a Palestinian person would just come to Marlborough College in Vermont. And she studied English teaching. So she had one of the same professors as me. And then she told me that the college had emailed her a few weeks prior and said that there's a girl named Charlie coming to Ramallah to teach English in the summer, who's from our same college. And she said, like, when Charlie comes, can you please welcome her and show her around the city? And Charlie was coming the next day. And the next day was my only full day in Palestine. Mm-hmm. So we picked Charlie up, and Charlie had just graduated, and we had a whole bunch of mutual friends. So we all just sat in a cafe gossiping about Marlborough, our college, and like people that we all knew or had some connection to. And my idea to meet people in Palestine who were different from me was completely lost. And the girl, her idea of finding out how people are the same was very much realized.
Okay. So you changed your mind about those, finding people who are different, or are you still looking for...
I'm still interested. Like, I don't know, it's, you know, the novelty is exciting, and I think that's a big part of solo travel. That's what I should have said comes to mind, is the word novelty. So it's still very interesting to me to try to seek out people who are different from me, but a lot of times I find out that they're not that different.
So what are you trying to find?
I don't know exactly if I'm trying to find something, just that I really get a thrill out of living in different places and experiencing just different cultures, different foods, different ways of life.
So if you experience some culture or a person who's really different to you or has different beliefs or something like that, you don't come from a place of judgment, I guess, because I know you a little bit, so it's just you're interested. But I'm wondering if there are some things where you say, okay, this is too different, where the situations where you said, okay, this may be political view or...
I guess in some ways I've surprised myself by being able to kind of swallow what I want to say sometimes when I disagree with somebody, in order for the sake of connections that maybe would be unlikely if I were to say I disagree with you.
Mm-hmm. But are you able to then stay true to yourself?
That's something I've been asking myself lately. I don't know, there has to be a line between... There has to be a balance, I guess, between getting the experience to really hear and make friends with people that might be like so different that some things are like, hey mate, that's not cool. Mm-hmm. The balance between being able to do that and have those friendships, and also speaking up for what you think is right or true.
What do you think scares people about traveling solo?
That's something I've never completely understood, to be honest, because there's a lot of things I'm scared of, but none of them have to do with traveling. Like, to me, that's not scary at all. And so people always say, like, oh, that's so brave, but, like, I don't think that's brave. I don't know. I mean, maybe people are scared of uncertainty. Like, maybe some people are really attached to their routine, or, like, maybe people who grew up in one place wouldn't know what it's like to move around. Could find it scary.
You come from the US, which is a very large country with a lot of sites. You could travel a lifetime there and not see everything.
True.
So I guess it's really easy to stay in just one country and travel around there. What made you go abroad? Like, was there something you wanted to experience except of India and the eco-hippie lifestyle to make you cross the border?
Since I was a kid, I just always fantasized about traveling outside of the country. It's just for some reason been something I've always been like rabidly curious about, and traveling in the US never seemed that interesting, because really that's what I'm seeking with travel. It's the novelty thing, feeling of novelty. Mm-hmm. And traveling in the US, I don't feel novelty.
That's so fun, because I've been to the US once, but I really want to go there, but I always keep myself from going, because I think when I'm in the country, I might never leave, because there's so much to see, and I am this kind of person who's like, oh, I want to see that, and then I want to see that, and it was like going from New York to Texas, and I don't know, Grand Canyon, and then Alaska, and San Francisco, and just so many things.
There's a lot going on there, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just the other way around with me.
to see the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't come from there, I'm sure it seems like interesting and novel and all that.
Yeah. So, what country do you think was the most interesting you visited?
Most interesting? That's so hard to say. Interesting in what terms? Like in terms of being really different? Or...
Well, I would make you decide what on your scale is really standing out, maybe.
What is really standing out? Let's see. Probably still India. Maybe just because it was the first place I went, I'm not sure. Maybe because it just feels very, very different to be there. Like everything is really intense. It's smelly and loud, and people are like following you in the street as though you would be a celebrity. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that to me, I mean, it's just the epitome of novelty, the experience you have in India. Yeah. And so I think that makes it one of the most interesting.
Yeah. I experienced India very in your face. Yes. Like it brings you to your knees. Yeah, I think it's just like you have to surrender to India.
Well, you don't have any choice.
Yeah, they don't, there is no choice. Otherwise, I don't know what you could do. But it's just like you go crazy, maybe.
Oh my God.
But it's simultaneously, it's a very good feeling to let go, like from this Western thinking or how things have to be, or
how things have to be.
Yeah, like the train leaves at 2. Yeah, maybe.
I remember staying in this one hostel called Chandrabhavan in Bangalore. That the hostel was on the corner of a major junction, and below the hostel was a flower market. And so if you were on the balcony of the hostel in the morning, you would see just this explosively colorful flower market below with all of these vehicles trying to pass through this junction without any traffic light or order. So there's like yellow rickshaws and motorbikes and cars and just like, and flowers everywhere and just all these different colors like in this swarm. It was the most beautiful thing to see.
Is there a part you like most?
Definitely the south. Like around, probably Tamil Nadu. There's in this city called Oroville that's like a giant intentional community city where it doesn't belong to India. Like the people there pay their taxes to Oroville rather than India, and they have about 2,000 or 3,000 people living there, and they have this goal of what they call human unity. That's the goal of Oroville, and they say Oroville is for everyone. And within Oroville, they have a whole bunch of smaller communities that are like alternative kind of projects, like with a lot of sustainable agriculture and alternative education and a lot of arts and culture. And they have like free cultural events. Like it's very culturally stimulating. You can go to a klezmer concert in the middle of South India in an auditorium full of people, with people singing in all kinds of different, like, Balkan languages. And these are, like, almost every night there's some kind of free cultural event. And it's a really controversial place, but I think it's very, very interesting, and you meet the most interesting people there.
How would you describe the community or an eco-community? What is it for you, for people who never...
Oh, right, okay. Eco-community is one specific type of intentional community. Intentional community, there's a lot of different definitions, but one that's prominent is a group of 5 or more people, so although some definitions say 20 or more people, living together on purpose. They're not part of the same family unit, who have some kind of a common vision for how they want their lives to be, and who consider themselves separate from, and in many cases better than, the mainstream society.
So you travel a lot to such communities, different communities, was it like eco-communities, or with a strong vision of how they want to live together? What differences did you experience on your travels? Like what different communities?
Oh, Okay, so there was the one I just told you about, Sadhana Forest inside of Oroville in India. That was the first one I went to. There was one that I lived in Florida that was very, very different. They were calling it an eco-village, but there wasn't really that much eco about it, except that they had a garden, and some of the residents participated in the garden. And it was really hard to like bring the community together. Where else? My mom lives in one in Maine, Belfast Co-housing, an eco-village. That's like much more, it's like a co-housing community, so it's different than the ones where everyone's living together. And it's more like older people, so everyone has their own space, but they have a common house that they share and do like community events. There's been a bunch I've been to in Israel. One that was really, really interesting was called Kibbutz Harel. And it's this community of around about 130 people who have a vision that they just want to live together, and they all have like a kind of a very similar spiritual path. Like they've developed a course that is their own kind of fusion of spirituality from different Eastern traditions. And when I heard about it the first time, I was like, it sounds kind of phony, like, people, like white-looking people living all like Eastern spirituality. Like it sounds like one of these not very authentic projects. But then I went there and volunteered for a couple weeks and found a couple really interesting things. One, that it's one of the only places I've been to that calls itself spiritual explicitly and also seems to really live it in terms of people there really didn't seem phony at all. They seemed incredibly authentic and like they were really living, as they would say, from their heart. Like all my encounters with people were just like, I don't know, I felt blown away by the kind of genuineness of the people there, and I'd want to emulate that. And then the other thing that was really interesting is most of the time these communities are really mired in conflict and drama. Not all the time, but like, they can be fairly tumultuous. And that contributes to them not being very socially sustainable, like not healthy on the social level, and then that often means that the community falls apart. Like conflict is the number one reason for the failure of these communities. So this community seemed to be the most socially sustainable, at least by my own observation, of any I've seen, and I've been to a bunch. And they said that they put the needs of the community above their individual needs. They don't gossip about each other. So if they have a problem with each other, maybe they'll tell one or two close friends, but not like in a shit-talking way, more like a, oh, I don't know how to process this experience, can you help me kind of way. And they just seem incredibly socially healthy. They all really love each other. They're all committed to staying there long-term. And of all of those 130 people, I think they said they've had one person leave, and that's in over 10 years of being a community.
Wow.
Yeah, doing something right. They don't have a permanent land, which is really too bad because the place they're staying doesn't want them there, and the state of Israel so far doesn't fulfill their promise to give them land.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like you visiting so many communities and being curious how different they are to each other and how different they are to yourself. You take the viewpoint of a researcher. So do you ever immerse yourself in those communities, or are you always a little bit on the outside watching what is happening?
Well, the research only started recently, and it's because I've spent so much time in those communities. I wanted to be able to help on a social level. So, I've immersed myself in terms of not being a researcher, but I've never stayed in one really, really long term. Like the longest has been like a few months. So in some of them, have been around for longer than a few months. So when you're just there for a few months as an outsider, I think it's not the same as being a researcher, but you're still not maybe completely in the community life. But in a lot of them, I felt still very much a part of it.
So why don't you only stay a few months?
You mean why I stay only a few months? It depends. Different circumstances. The one in Florida, I stayed a few months and then went for a trip, and I was coming back, and it completely fell apart and dissolved.
Okay.
Then there was another that I was a part of in like a very cooperative house share, and that fell apart because of conflict. And then the others have just been like in the context of doing a trip, and it's just like a temporary trip. I can't stay that long because I'm not working usually, and it's just always a moment in time. Mm-hmm. But now going forward, when I finish my research, I can stay longer than a few months.
And you want to?
If I find one that I really like. I'm searching for, a base.
Okay. And that would be preferably in a eco-community setting. So no.
Maybe.
Okay.
I want to always have places like that be a part of my life and spend some time in them. But I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I guess I'm searching for a base that feels right socially, and maybe that will be a community. And maybe it won't be. I'm open to both.
Have you ever thought of building your own community?
I used to want to do that. Me and an ex had a plan to do something like that together. But then after we broke up and I visited more communities and started researching communities, I started to think, I don't really want to start one. Like, it's an insane amount of work, and you're bitter because other people don't participate as much as you do, and you have founder's syndrome and you can't relinquish control. And I want to live a relaxed life. I'd much rather gain skills that I can use to contribute something to communities rather than have that on my shoulders to start one.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. I guess you find those communities mostly via internet, like searching for them mostly online. And also then word of mouth.
Yeah.
But are there communities who are really close? Like you say, oh, there's this rumor about this one community which is supposed to be in the jungle, I don't know, of Costa Rica. And it should be really cool, but you don't get there without invitation or something.
Well, there are a lot that have programs where you need to sign up for a specific program in order to go there. Like, usually the more established ones have something like that. I did go to one really intense one in the jungle of Costa Rica where they were trying to be completely self-sufficient, preparing for when our society completely breaks down because of climate change and economic chaos and whatever. And they were so extreme about this that they were amassing weapons, arrows, like homemade arrows with poison from poison dart frogs so that they could defend themselves if anybody came to like steal their food in the future when they're the only ones who have food because the cities don't work or whatever.
Okay, that sounds intense, yeah.
Yeah, it was intense.
How long have you been there?
Just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
It was really interesting. Very, I guess, extreme-minded people. They're not necessarily wrong, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, it was extreme.
Would you go back there?
Probably not now because they've made it quite expensive to visit. Mm-hmm. And I don't like to spend money.
Do you have any special traditions traveling? So something maybe you take from every place you go, or as a reminder, or... Oh.
That's a really good question. Do I? I don't really take things because my bag is really heavy and it's pretty much everything I own. I'm usually trying to get rid of things. Sometimes when I leave somewhere, I'll think about like what I want to leave there, like mentally. Mm-hmm. Like maybe some attachment that isn't doing me good or something. It's easier than taking things in terms of weight. Mm-hmm. Makes you feel lighter too.
So you said your backpack is pretty much everything you own. When you first started traveling, did you prepare specially for it or buy new things and then left them somewhere because you didn't need them? Do you remember?
No, I didn't really do anything special with preparation. It's just, over the years, my mom wanted to downsize her storage unit, so we got rid of most of my stuff, and I have like one box at my dad's house. And now one suitcase actually is in Israel with a friend, but for the most part, everything I need.
Mm-hmm. So you're comfortable with that, not having a base where all your things are?
Well... I don't know. On the one hand, I feel a little insecure not feeling there's one place where I can permanently leave things, because nobody really wants to like permanently keep my shit, which is fair enough. They shouldn't have to. But on the other hand, I feel really uncomfortable accumulating stuff, because then I have to take care of it and put it somewhere. So I feel most comfortable if I like downsize what I need.
Okay. So if you meet different people who aren't traveling, maybe they say things to you like, well, I would like to travel more, but I don't have anybody who goes with me, or I don't know how to start. What would you tell them?
If they say they don't have anybody that goes with them, I tell them to use couchsurfing and workaway, and to search for workaways that aren't just you're staying with like one family, but workaways where there's a whole bunch of other volunteers staying. So you have a ready-made group of friends, and you can leave that workaway with travel buddies.
Maybe that what you did, because you went to a community, so you knew where you are going, and you had a place where you went alone, but you were supposed to meet other people who went there alone.
Yeah, I usually find that's the best way. It's like destination number one in a country should be, I think, ideally somewhere where you can form a community.
Yeah.
Also, there's a lot of couchsurfing events in most major cities. Maybe not now with COVID, but normally there'll be a weekly couchsurfing meetup in most cities where people from the local community, together with people who are traveling through, meet, and it's all just like people who want to meet new people and exchange cultures. And I think that's a really nice way to meet people. Also, Facebook groups of where you're going in order to check what community events are on. Like check, for example, for community yoga, like where it's donation-based yoga, usually somewhere informal where people like hang out and chat after. Or, all kinds of different community events. Sometimes there's language exchanges. Maybe it wouldn't be like the first thing I would do for fun, but I would do it to go and like meet people, and it's nice to give something back.
Yeah. Did you have on your travels any bad experience, you would say, like you could have prevented, maybe?
Bad experiences I could have prevented? Plenty. Usually through my own hastiness. I needed to find my couchsurfing host, and he was at work, and I was trying to find his house, and I had my huge backpack, and I was just wandering all across the street, up and down, again and again, in like 40-degree summer heat in the desert, looking for this guy, or rather for his house, and I couldn't find it. And finally this car pulls over and takes pity on me, like, what are you looking for? Let me help you. And it was this guy and a woman in the front seat, and they drove me around to help me look for it, and we couldn't find it. So the guy was like, okay, I'm not letting you just wait here until he gets back to work. You can come back to my house. And I figured that the woman would be there too, otherwise I probably would have been more hesitant. But he dropped her off partway through. Okay. And so we got to his house, and we went inside, and there's two really, really, really big dogs. And they were actually really friendly, but they were kind of intimidating too. At first. And then he tells me sit down at the kitchen table, I'm going to make you some food. And I start to notice there's like a lot of knives around the house. And he was like sitting at the table talking to me and like playing with one of these knives, like a big knife, but just like nonchalantly playing with it. And I was thinking like, is he threatening me, or is he just fidgeting with his hands? And then he goes around the living room and starts picking up all the knives. And he's like, I just realized there's a lot of knives lying around. And he put them all in the sink. Okay. And I was so relieved when he was picking them up, because he picked them up really, really slowly. And I was like, is this going to go wrong for me? Is this where it ends?
Oh my God.
And I was so relieved when he put them in the sink. And he let me have a shower, and he made me food. And then he helped me talk to my couchsurfing host, and drove me to the house later.
You were very trusting.
Yeah, I'm very trusting, sometimes to my detriment, but usually I'm glad for that.
Okay. Let's wrap things up. I always do a word wrap at the end, which means I throw words at you and you just answer the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. So, bed or breakfast?
Bed.
Jungle or desert?
Jungle.
Lake or ocean?
Ocean.
Camping van or 5-star hotel?
Camping van.
Being alone is for me.
Sometimes. A lot of the time.
Okay. And being lonely?
Oh, I understood the statement wrong. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Being lonely sucks.
Okay. Yeah. The next destination on my bucket list.
Egypt.
Why?
Because my friends that I first met in India a million years ago talked about this place called Dahab.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a diving kind of relaxed town on the Red Sea where there's gorgeous sea life and crazy desert trekking. And I've been trying to go there, and I've tried to go like 3 times, and every time it gets canceled, so I have to go.
3 things I always take with me.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is passport, but that seems way too obvious.
Well, you can take 3 things and the passport.
Okay. Other things. Okay. A deck of Messenger Oracle cards that I like to read.
Okay.
What else? Oh my god, a notebook for writing in. And my laptop to work so I can keep traveling.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Cait, for telling your story and being patient with me and my English.
Oh, your English is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Coming from an English teacher.
No, really. I hope someday I speak another language at the level you speak English.
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you.
No, it's really real.
Yeah. So I wish you the best of luck with all your travels and hope you find your community base at some point.
Thank you.
And I hope to meet you soon in another country.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Did we set the mood right? Are you now wanting to go to a nice tropical place and listen to more cicadas yourself? I hope so. And let me know if you do. Putting this podcast out is a very fun thing to do, but I also would like to hear back from you about how you liked it, and maybe read about your own solo travel stories. Or tell me why you haven't traveled solo yet. Write me a comment or an email. Please also like and follow this podcast if you liked it, so more people will see it recommended. If you would like to learn more English before you go on your first or next trip, contact Cait directly. She's the perfect English teacher. You find all the information in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If so, you might also like the one with Emma, safety and Wi-Fi. Check it out. And last but not least, don't listen to us, go find out.